Alright, say hello to the camera. Alright, so here we are at BMW for my umpteenth test ride. Hopefully this time I'll become a customer. But no, if you're in the neighborhood, please drop into this wonderful store because everyone's really friendly here and they give you great coffee as well. Alright, so what's the route? Can I go to the highway? Because I want to take a bit of a spin. Right, thank you. Okay, so finally I rode thanks to Rahul, I rode the F900R, which is the street version of this bike. But now BMW have made available for me the F900XR, which is actually looking quite stunning here in this red color. And the form factor is much better than the street bike because it gives me a sense of space already even before getting on the bike. But I'm just taking a quick look here so that you guys can see what a beautiful bike this is. Really nice. And it's a great offering from BMW because from their perspective it's sort of entry level. But let's get on the bike and then we'll take a look at it later. Here we are. There goes the key. Get on top. It's quite comfortable, very, very comfortable. There, it's firing up. Wow, we're in Andheri, you can tell. And that's the engine that I loved. It's got a growly menace to it. I don't know if you can hear that, but I certainly can. So let's see. Yes, the position's quite nice, but it's not as comfortable as a adventure bike is, like perhaps the Tiger or the Africa Twin. But you know, that's kind of unfair. This is more like a sports bike. It's got 17-inch wheels, both levels. And we are off. So it's very, the stance is quite sports bike like. I'm not even feeling like I'm on anything that has longer suspension and more ground clearance. Feels quite easy to ride also. The seating position is really nice actually because it feels sporty without cramping you up too much. And so that actually feels pretty good. This engine somehow, I know it's the same engine as the F900, but it feels a little bit different. I guess that's because we're still in the inner lanes. Maybe once you get onto the highway, you get a different sense. Wow, this is really nimble. It's really, really maneuverable. Got a growly, rough engine, but so maneuverable. Whoa! Fun. Brakes are really good. Very confidence inspiring, very easy to ride this bike. Very, very maneuverable. The rear brake seems positioned too close to the foot peg, but that's a minor thing really. What I feel is like the engine vibrations are coming up through the handlebars, a little bit on the tank. This is actually feeling a little bit like the Tiger did, and I think with the Tiger, one was comparing it to the 800, which is butter smooth, so it got exaggerated a little bit. I might have been a little unfair to the bike, but anyway, there we go. So I'm going to take a left here at this signal. The suspension set up nicely. It's a little bit sporty, but not too stiff, not harsh. So it's going over these really bad roads quite well, and it's soaking up the bumps quite nicely. It's quite comfortable. Seating position is lovely. Bike is extremely maneuverable. Very flickable. Like Haven't ridden a bike like this. I don't know which way the highway goes. I think it's this way. The ABS, I can feel it kicking in on the rear brake. But this bike is a whole lot of fun, really, because it's so flickable, so easy to maneuver, so well poised and balanced, and the position is so nice. It doesn't feel like a tall bike at all. I feel like I'm on a sports bike. The 17-inch wheels at both ends obviously help matters quite a bit, because you're not dealing with a 19 or a 21-inch wheel up front. So that adds to the nimble nature of the bike. But it's a lot of fun. It's like very confidence inspiring. Even in traffic, you feel you're totally in control. The brakes are quite decent, so you never feel nervous about stopping. So it's quite fun. Vibes in the handlebars for sure, but somehow I'm not minding them. It's got that rough twin engine note and feel, and it's actually quite enjoyable and fun, and I'm not really minding the vibrations right now. I don't know if I'm going for a really long ride, if I will start to, but at the moment, honestly, it's just part and package of the bike, and you feel like it's part of the experience. Only has fun after 5,000 RPM. Before that, it's kind of utilitarian. So here we are. This is the highway. We're going to take a ride here. So far, this bike has been quite a lot of fun. I'm having some good luck at the signals today. Let's go, let's go. It's quite good at soaking up the bumps, and that's really important in our country, because our roads can go from being really good roads to absolutely abysmal roads, and so the bikes have to be versatile enough to handle everything. And this one seems to be. It's handling bad roads with aplomb, and it's set up really well to be a pretty cool sports bike that can take advantage of really good roads, smooth roads, curvy roads. Really a fun bike. So dynamically, just in terms of how the bike handles, I'm very happy with it already in this short while. It's fun. I mean, I would love to own this kind of bike just from the nature of its dynamic setup, how it balances, how it feels really planted at both the front and the rear, how it's so nimble, how it's so easy to move in and out of traffic, how easy it is to handle, how light it feels, and yet it doesn't feel like it's on stilts, unlike, for example, something like the Versys 650 feels very top heavy and feels like it's on big stilts. So it's not really like that. It feels like it's just a slightly bigger proportioned sports bike, and feels, for my height, I'm 5'11", it just feels absolutely great. I mean, your legs feel a little bit tucked in compared to, let's say, the adventure bikes, but that's actually a nice feeling, because you feel like you're well tucked in and streamlined and aerodynamically kind of tucked into the bike. So it's actually pretty fun to ride like that. And it's not really, there's not much of a lean forward. It's the whole riding position for me at my height, 5'11", is absolutely the best I've ever experienced on any bike. And it's very light. The engine will polarize a little bit. It's got a certain grunt to it. That's a lot of fun, especially at 5,000 plus RPM. It gets really interesting. Or just under 5,000 RPM, it gets quite interesting. Well, we are on the highway. Let's put it through its paces. Brakes are really good up front. Rear brake pedal, I think, is too close to the foot peg, but I'm sure that's something that one can get used to. The engine's fun actually. I mean, it's kind of low down in the revs, it's not that much fun, but as soon as you go over 4,000 RPM, it starts really entertaining you. And so flickable. Best part is you can move back in the seat and lean forward, and it feels like a race bike. And in fourth gear at about 4,000 RPM, it's doing a beautiful job, feeling quite smooth, very enjoyable, really easy to manage. So it's actually bringing the fun back because you don't have to worry about it. It's not intimidating at all. It's really easy to handle. It feels like a friendly bike. Slightly vibey at the handlebars for sure, that I'm noticing, and the engine's got this low end kind of growl, which kind of adds to the whole vibey feel of it. So definitely a little bit vibey, but like I said earlier, it feels like it's a part of the personality of the bike, and it's not really feeling like a very negative trait. Kind of goes with the ride so far, but over a long period it might bother you. So to come to the suspension, which is obviously an important aspect in India, it's set up sportily. So I'm feeling like it's well in control, it's fairly stable, it's relatively speaking stiff. It's not exactly stiff, but it's not exactly plush and wallowing at all. So from that perspective, it's quite nice. Almost like a commuter bike to handle, that easy. So it's really, really nice that way. So I was talking about the suspension earlier. The suspension is set up really nicely, especially I think for Indian conditions. This would be actually phenomenal because it's set up sportily enough and stiffly enough that you enjoy the actual control and the rigidity of the bike and the predictability of the bike when you're throwing it around into corners, or into when you're maneuvering the bike, when you're flicking the bike, zigzagging it or turning it into corners. It's just very, very maneuverable and really well set up suspension. So that's really enjoyable. And on the other hand, it's soaking up enough of the bumps and taking on these bad roads without really causing you much discomfort at all. So in that way, it actually feels fairly pliable without actually feeling too soft that it starts wallowing around, that you don't really know what the bike's going to do if you brake really hard or turn in very quickly, etc. So it's actually a fantastic balance, I think. Yeah, I would say this bike starts enjoying itself after 4,000 RPM. $6,000 is about its optimum RPM, I think, between 4 to 6, 7 maybe. Beyond that, I was close to the red line a little bit, not exactly redlining, but just a little bit before that. It felt a little harsh, but not too bad. So it's actually something that you'll be able to enjoy quite a lot, because right from about, let's see, we are at about just under 4,000 RPM now, and after 4,000 it suddenly comes alive. And look at how it's handling these bad roads. It's really, I'm really impressed with how it's been set up, because it's really allowing me to enjoy these roads and still have the pleasure of riding a sports bike. And that's really something, because it's a very difficult balance to attain, and BMW have managed to do it. Really kudos to them. Really good bike. Balance on this bike is quite nice. The wheelbase, I think, is just the right length that you can enjoy it without it being too frisky. So it's a good balance of stability and flickability. The engine is something that might polarize people. There might be differences of opinion because it's not exactly the smoothest engine. that one has seen, but it's got a lot of character, especially past the 4000 rpm mark and up to 7000 rpm. It's lovely. Below 4000 at about 3000 rpm, it's kind of not very interesting, and above that it gets a little vibey. It's a little bit vibey throughout. It's got a grunt and growl. It's kind of got a rough character to it. So if you enjoy that kind of thing, you'll love this engine. It's a very friendly bike to ride, enjoyable in that rpm band, I think, and overall just a great experience. It doesn't have a massive amount of torque at the bottom end. The torque starts at about 3000 rpm, 3500 rpm, and then you really start enjoying the character of the engine. So a lot of fun, but is it extremely versatile? That's a good question. It's very versatile in the sense that you can ride it over all kinds of roads and still enjoy the sports bike nature of the thing. So it's actually quite impressive on that front. But from the engine front, the engine isn't extremely versatile, I wouldn't say. It's got great character that you can enjoy in a certain rpm band at a certain kind of pace, and it's very enjoyable there. Doesn't have a lot of torque at the bottom end, so if you're used to that sort of thing on an adventure bike, then you might miss that a little bit. At very high rpms it gets a little bit rough, so if you're used to an inline 4, or if you want an inline 4 or something of that sort in terms of a sports bike, then this may not really completely be something that satisfies you completely, but it'll entertain you, no doubt. But inline 4s are a completely different experience because they're really good at the high rpm high rpm range. And V-twins, for example, really good at torque at the bottom end. So this is somewhere in the middle because it's a parallel twin with a different firing order that gives it a sense of, it's got good torque, mind you. It's especially when I tried this engine on the F900R, it felt a little bit different there though. I don't know how. I'll do some investigation to find out why it feels a little bit different, because the torque was immediately obvious on the F900R. This is the same engine, so ideally there should be the same kind of feel on this engine, but it feels a little bit different. Feels like it only picks up torque and the whole fun character at 3,500 plus RPM, which isn't too bad. I mean, you get there very, very easily. I'm riding right now at 25 kilometers an hour, and I'm at about 3,000. So as soon as you go to 30 kilometers an hour, you're already at 3,500 RPM, and then the engine character becomes really fun then. So I'm kind of enjoying this, and I've taken the wrong turn, I think. Yes, I have. I had to take the next left, so let's go back. Interesting lane that I've discovered. So this is what I'm talking about. If you're crawling about in traffic at low speeds, then this is not a bike you're going to enjoy. But then, that's not why you get super bikes anyway. Then you might want to get that one, the Himalayan, which is great at pottering around. But dynamically, again, from a handling perspective, from a balancing perspective, in terms of how light the bike is, how it feels, how it balances, how it maneuvers, even at this speed, it's a lot of fun. So that's what I mean, that in that department this bike excels. Where it needs to be a little bit different is in engine character at low RPM, I think, and maybe the vibes. If it can reduce those, that would please a lot of riders, in my opinion. So overall, a great bike. If you're considering a bike that you need a lot of versatility with, in terms of where you want to ride, how you want to ride, you want to enjoy a sports bike, but you also want to be comfortable, you want to do long rides that you can sit on the bike comfortably for hours and hours, yet you want a sporty bike, you want a little bit of fun in the engine that has a little bit of grunt, a little bit of personality. some torque, really good fun after 3,000-4,000 RPM all the way up to the red line, just close to the red line, then this is a great bike for you, because it does everything fairly well. It's got the BMW badge, and in terms of handling, it's absolutely superb. In terms of the engine, because there are so many different kinds of engines out there, like inline fours, V-twins, triples, single cylinders, kind of depends on what exactly you want. This as a parallel twin engine is pretty good. It's a pretty good engine. Gives you a lot of character, gives you a lot of power, allows you to have a lot of fun, is light, doesn't add too much girth, it doesn't add too much weight, and yet gives you enough power to enjoy yourself. So quite versatile, a lot of fun, but most impressed by the handling characteristics, the ergonomics, how it's set up dynamically, the suspension, how it's handling bad roads. That is just superb. I wish other bikes would take a page out of the book that this bike has written in terms of how it handles and how it's set up for versatile conditions, including very challenging Indian conditions. Let's talk a little bit more about the engine. The engine, like I said, it's fun. It could polarize, it could create some opinions about how it behaves, what it feels like, what the character's like. It's a little bit rough. It's not exactly a smooth engine, so don't expect the smoothness of an inline 4 or even a triple engine. It's a parallel twin, so you're going to get that kind of character, and you're getting a few vibes on the handlebars, some on the tank, very little, not really much on the foot pegs. I can't really feel anything on the foot pegs really, just the handlebars a little bit and just on the tank. But that's part of the personality of the bike. It feels in character with the bike, in character with the whole package, and when you roll on the throttle, you get the whole buzz through the bike, and that kind of feels like it's part of the bike and it's part of the riding experience. So it doesn't bother me very much, to be honest, but on long rides it might. It sounds raucous, it feels a little bit raucous, feels a little bit rough around the edges. It's that kind of bike. So that's really the personality of the bike, and if you enjoy that kind of engine, then sure, this will be the perfect bike for you. But if you want the smoothness of an inline 4 or a triple, or at very high RPMs you want a smooth engine, or you want a lot of torque at the bottom end, then you may feel like this is not absolutely exactly what you wanted. It will deliver on some fronts, and you can definitely enjoy it a lot, but it won't be the engine of your dreams. So that's really where we're at. But it's a really good bike as a package. I think BMW have put together something really good, and by BMW standards it's relatively inexpensive. You can add on some options in terms of electronics and whatnot and customize this bike to your needs. But what I'm most amazed by is how easy it is to ride in traffic, how much versatility it offers in terms of road conditions. I'm not at all feeling taxed riding this bike around even in andheri traffic at this time in the afternoon. So mode is over here on the right handlebar. You just press it and it goes from road to rain and back from rain to road. And there's a jog dial which helps you select all kinds of things on the menu. You can see here for yourself. I bring up the menu. Oh, there it is. So I just press menu once, so I press menu once, there it is. Let me show you. So I bring up the menu, settings, telephone, media, navigation, my vehicle, etc. Although I'm going to go back because it looks like it might rain a little bit. There's also cruise control here, which you can set. I've never got the idea of cruise control. I don't know why people love it so much, but this bike does have it. So if you're going for long distance journeys, this is great. So even at these low cruising speeds of about 60-70 at about 3,500 RPM, it actually feels like a pretty nice bike, very enjoyable. I'm really loving the riding. It's brought back the simplicity of motorcycle riding for some reason. That's what I feel this bike does, that it kind of brings back when we used to ride without too many gizmos. I'm not saying this bike doesn't have gizmos, but it harks back to the simplicity of motorcycling, enjoying it. It's kind of comfortable. It's not squeezed into contortions like some sports bikes are. It's not big and heavy like some adventure bikes are, so intimidating. It's kind of really giving you the best of all worlds. It's comfortably set up. It feels sports bike like. It's got enough power. Feels simple to ride. It's not intimidating. It's light. It feels like something I just quickly fire up and take on the grocery shopping trip. It moves through traffic quite easily. It's not getting very hot. I've ridden it for about half an hour now and it's still fairly comfortable. So it's got a lot going for it. I really like this bike. The stance is really good. You know, it's uncomplicated in terms of what it's doing. There's the BMW sign. Let me take it over it really handles these potholes and really terrible roads very, very well. Beautifully set up. So there we are. It's a beautiful looking bike, glowing absolutely in the sunlight in that red color, which is looking phenomenal. Reminds me of actually a Ducati. Really nice looking bike, and I must commend BMW for making a bike that's so beautifully set up in terms of riding position, in terms of the suspension, in terms of the ergonomics, how it is to ride. This didn't feel like a tall bike. It didn't feel like a taller version of a sports bike. It felt like a comfortable sports bike that's been designed for regular sized people. I'm 5'11" and I absolutely loved everything in terms of how its ergonomics was, how the seating position was. It was really comfortable. I could see myself doing hours and hours on this bike and yet getting that sports bike like feel. So phenomenal bike in that respect. By BMW standards, it's quite economically priced in terms of where the ranges start from. In terms of super bikes, this is almost, you might call it the entry level, the F900R and this F900 XR based on the 900cc engine. And it's a really great option for Indian consumers. It's fantastic that this bike is available because it can handle Indian conditions really well. It did beautifully on Indian roads. The tires felt planted, sticky. I never felt nervous. I felt this was so friendly to ride. Never felt intimidated like you sometimes do on adventure bikes that claim to be good for Indian roads with their 21-inch wheels and their weight and sometimes their girth of the tank, etc. Can be intimidating unless you're used to riding that kind of bike, and they're pretty good for long distances, but in the city they can be a little bit, they require a lot of attention. So in that sense, this bike takes you back to when motorcycling was a simple, fun, pleasurable activity without too much playing on your mind in terms of how powerful the engine is, powerful enough to scare you. This is not. This isn't powerful enough to scare you. It's powerful enough to have a lot of fun. It is a super bike, make no mistake. The engine character is what is actually people might debate a little bit, because I feel in terms of the dynamic setup, in terms of ergonomics, seating position, flickability, nimbleness, how it handles, how it feels like a sports bike with 17-inch wheels at both ends. The wheelbase I think is perfect. I feel there'll be very little argument, unless of course if somebody has exceptional preferences, that's a different matter. But I think for the average person, this is a great bike. Straight off, feels immediately friendly. The engine is where there might be some debate, because the engine is rough. There are some vibes coming up through the handlebars and the tank a little bit. It feels fairly rough. It sounds quite rough. There is torque, but it comes at about 3,000-4,000 RPM. That's when you start to have fun. Doesn't feel immediately torquey like a V-twin that sets off like a rocket. Doesn't have the smooth character at the top like the inline fours or even the triples. So it's kind of somewhere in between. It's a parallel twin that's set up with a firing order that makes things very interesting and definitely gives it a kind of rough and ready feel. It feels growly. It feels a little bit coarse. But that's part of the personality of the bike. But it doesn't get all the way over there just like a Ducati. It doesn't feel like an L-twin. So it's kind of a mixed bag as far as the engine goes. But as a whole package, I think it's actually a lovely bike. It's a phenomenal bike. And it's got the BMW badge. It's a very versatile bike. You can take it long distance touring if you want. You can use it as a sports bike if you want. I'd be happy to use this in the city, going to office. I'd be happy to pick this bike up and go grocery shopping because it's so easy and so friendly, and that makes a huge difference. You might have a fantastic big heavy bike like the 1250 GS standing in your garage, but you're only going to use it once you've planned a big trip out with 5 friends and you made preparations for 2 days, and then you're going all the way from here to Ladakh or whatever it is, once a year or twice a year if you're lucky. But this bike you could use every day because you could enjoy the sports bike nature of it on the highway, going to office if you have a bit of a highway stretch in the middle like me, or you could enjoy it in the lanes. You could take it grocery shopping like I said, because it's friendly enough, light enough to do that. It can become like a pair of comfortable old sneakers that used to be high performance shoes when you started. So it's really a very versatile bike and really a very fun offering in this Indian marketplace. And I see this line doing very well over the next 10 to 15 years for BMW, provided they get their pricing absolutely right and make this accessible to a whole bunch of riders in India.